Hello, welcome to the introduction to accessible Office documents. My name's Jeff Mills. I'm a board member of UCAF, and I'm also co-founder of a company called GrackleDocs that helps with accessibility out of Google G Suite. So we're going to cover a few things today about accessible Office documents, and notably it's the law. Talk a little about what are Office documents, the general rules around Office documents, and then accessibility within Office software itself. So to cover it to start with, we have to realize that it's estimated that up to 4% of the population relies on some sort of assisted technology to look at electronic documents and web pages. So it could be screen reading software or braille displays or screen magnifiers. If electronic documents aren't created with accessibility in mind, they become extremely difficult, if not impossible, to read or navigate by a large number of people. Importantly, accessibility to electronic documents is a right that's protected by law in pretty much every country in the world. It ensures access for persons with disabilities. Companies are protected against legal action, and it's just good business. There's a large segment of population that can equally participate and take advantage of the products and services that are on offer. So let's look at a bit of Office document software. Well, there's many pieces of software out there. There's the two giants in Microsoft and Google. And I think Google G Suite is just renaming to Google Workplace, but it's the same thing. But there are also other document software out there, Zoho, Polaris, LibreOffice, and so on, that produced documents of some sort. Today, we're going to focus on a couple of areas. One is general accessibility within documents and go through some guidelines there, but then we'll go deeper into things like Google and Microsoft to see how they may work through their accessibility guidelines. So one of the main things in Office documents in accessibility is ensure that you have headings. Headings provide context and a way to navigate through a document for users of assistive technologies. And don't think that just by making a line bold 20 point, it becomes a heading. That's not true. You have to use the styles that are involved to make a styled heading. That way the screen reader can actually work out what a heading is and make the user run through the document far more easily, jumping from heading to heading or up and down to headings. Headings should be selected based on the hierarchy. So you'll start with heading 1, you'll go to heading 2, and maybe heading 3. But from heading 3, you don't jump to heading 5. So you have to run up and down the headings in accordance with their numbers. So heading 1 to heading 2 to heading 3, possibly back to heading 1, but not from heading 1 to heading 3. And items of equal importance should be equal level headings. So if a subheading 3 is being used and then the next item is of similar value, heading 3 should be used again. Images, very important. Always add alternative text, or otherwise known as alt text, to the image. And that can be for images, charts, graphs, and sometimes tables to ensure that the user of visual impairments can access the information that's included within these visuals. And the text there should provide sufficient information so that anyone who's unable to see them can still understand the position they're trying to convey. There are no hard and fast rules here of what it should say, because it depends on the image, the context, the intent the author may have had. But one simple trick is to imagine describing the image to someone over the phone. The more important the image content, the more descriptive the alternative text should be. Color contrast is very important too. It's essential that there's an appropriate contrast between the text and background. And in very general terms, lightly colored text should have a darker background and darkly colored text should have a lighter background. There are other rules around this for all sorts of abilities, but as a general rule, make sure that the contrast is high. Lists are really important. A bit like headings. A list is a tool that's like a bulleted or numbered list that screen readers can effectively read back to someone that they're part of a group. Manually inserting any of the list items won't help. Any numbered list that has multiple layers should use a different number scheme for each level so that lists of things can be easily discerned between each other. And then general legibility. Make sure to make your document as easy to read, not only for those with assisted technologies, but for everybody. Sans serif fonts generally are considered more legible for monitors than soft serif fonts. And generally color plays an important role. The color scheme itself should have a contrast between light and dark without being too extreme. Too little or too much contrast can make the document difficult to read for those who are colorblind or with low vision. And then certain color combinations of bright colors can cause headaches and make it uncomfortable to read in the way it's been laid out. And even the most able sighted person can see that on television sometimes if very gaudy colors are used for too long, how hard that becomes to read. We can go beyond documents. What about presentations and spreadsheets, which are documents of types, but they're handled slightly differently? So if we look at PowerPoint and slides, for instance, they're the kind of slideshows, of which I'm showing you one here. It's all the things that we mentioned before, but some extra things in there as well. So try to avoid those lovely transitions and animations if possible. I know they're pretty fun sometimes, but if you can try and reduce those to minimum, that's really helpful. Then we go back to the font and font sizes that we were talking before. Try and use sans serif fonts. Arial and Verdana are good examples of those. But try and make sure that the minimum font size on a PowerPoint presentation is 20 points. So 20 points and above is a good angle to start on your PowerPoint or slides shows. Make sure the color contrast, as we were talking before, there is sufficient color contrast in all slides, and don't use colors just as a way to convey content because it won't be read back to someone. So you need to be more descriptive on how something, the content needs to be conveyed. When adding tables, only use the simplest of data tables. Data tables being read back to someone is very complex anyway, and the software normally has quite a job to try and make sure it's read back in the correct way. And then further on, things like embedded multimedia. If you've embedded a movie, make sure that it's captioned and that the player controls are accessible. If we look at Excel or sheets, spreadsheets, again, simple is good. Break down complex data sets into logical tables, ideally within the same worksheet. Reserve the first worksheet for a contents or index page. So if you've got multiple sheets in your spreadsheet, make sure that there is a worksheet that defines what's out in the rest of them. Insert all text and data with the logical path that a keyboard user would take. So as a general rule, the keyboard owner will navigate from A1 cell until a table is reached. Avoid empty cells as much as you possibly can. Otherwise, someone is spacing through empty cells to try and find information. You need to adjust the cell height and width to ensure all the text you appear is visible in your spreadsheet. Try not to hide any text underneath those cells. Make sure that you're adding alt text to charts and graphics as before. Avoid using the visual devices such as color and shading to divide up data regions, because again, that won't be read back to someone. An important one is try to avoid merging data or header cells. It causes navigation problems, and it's very hard to work out what row matches what column header, etc. And then finally, when you actually save your spreadsheet, make sure the focus is on cell A1, unless you specifically want a user to open it up with a very specific cell in mind. So they're just general rules that are out there, but actually we went back to the beginning of the conversation here with there is Microsoft Office and Google G Suite. They have some accessibility options that can help you along your way rather than trying to remember all of these tips. In Microsoft Office, there's an inbuilt accessibility checker. And in Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, you can select Review, Check Accessibility, and look at your results. And it will show you a list of errors, warnings, and tips how to fix and recommend each of those. And here's an option here that this is the kind of accessibility checker comes up and says there's a merged or split cell in this case, so you need to look at, and it helps you with what to fix and how to fix it. In G Suite, there's a third-party accessibility checker, and at the beginning I said I'm co-founder of a company called GrackleDocs. We are the third-party accessibility checker for Google G Suite. There isn't one built in, and we've created an add-on for docs, sheets, and slides. In the end, it works quite similarly to the Microsoft version of an accessibility checker, but there's a couple of extra steps to make sure that you've got this on your Google G Suite implementation. So you need to install the add-ons to start with. So in Docs sheet, if you're in a doc, a sheet, or a slide, select add-ons and manage add-ons, type Grackle and install the add-on that's there. And then once installed, Grackle can be launched from the add-ons menu. And when it launches, it will scan through your document and give you feedback on accessibility and how to remediate. And it'll also allow you to export to an accessible PDF as well. And that's what I wanted to say for accessible Office documents today. I hope that's been informative, and thank you very much. Goodbye.